their psychic powers of lower nature became bent upon being used in the feeding of their relentless desires and acquisitive covetousness for the material things of others. And they used magical methods of the left-handed path, black magic, to steal what they wanted for the personal self. Early on in the race, before it became excessively influenced by the Dark Brotherhood, the initiate priests and adepts had taught their disciples the secret mantrams and rituals and methods for the practicing of white magic, for the good of all. And over the millennia, the secret sounds and words and procedures filtered out to the masses, who all learned how to practice the art called magic. When used for selfish purposes, it can be referred to as sorcery or black magic, which the majority practiced. They learned and used the mantrams for protecting themselves, then summoning the lesser devas, then commanding the devas and elementals to do their dirty work for them, stealing, setting fire to an enemy's house, harming other people, causing terminal illnesses, destroying properties, and then dismissing them, each phase accompanied by a specific mantram. It became a national plague and completely upset the plans by Earth's hierarchy for the Atlantean race, which is one of the reasons why the decision was made to terminate the fourth root race. But that's getting ahead of myself. Because of the astral sensitivity, poorly developed mind, desirousness gone berserk, and the predisposition toward magical work, the Black Lodge made tremendous inroads into the Atlantean race, and they had their own mystery schools and initiates and disciples. Their initiate leaders were known as the Sons of Belial and the Lords of the Dark Face, while their opponents as agents for the spiritual hierarchy of Earth were known as the Sons of the Law of One and the Lords of the Shining Countenance. The motivation for the dark magicians was power and control and selfishness. The motivation for the white magicians was love and altruistic service and evolutionary advancement for the race of man in accordance with the plan of Sanat Kumara. A great war ensued between the two idealistically opposed lodges during the latter era of the Atlantean race and lasted for thousands of years, primarily fought on the astral planes, but periodically manifest on the dense physical level. Essentially, it was an astral war that found occasional physical expression. The methodology of magic was employed. The Deva evolution came to be extensively involved, as summoned by mantrams. 7. Ray forces were focused and manipulated and thrust against the opponent, and the armamentarium of the high initiates was brought to bear against the opposing side. The war so upset the plans for the parallel evolutions of the Devas and humanity that the Shambhala Council, as chaired by Sanat Kumara, made a decision to bring the Atlantean experiment to a close and to get on with the fifth root race of man. It's hard to conceptualize that a state of war could have gone on for so long. But there is no such thing as time on the astral planes, and hence it didn't take an extremely long time for the two lodges to conduct the war. It merely precipitated into physicality at varying times in the illusional timeline of the Atlantean era, and only appeared to last hundreds of thousands of years. So there wasn't just one major cataclysm and sinking of Great Atlantis, but several, and all of it was spread out over what we think of as time. Please click on Time as an Illusion. Each time, the Manu of the First Ray Department of Hierarchy was called upon to conduct the operation. And the destroyer aspect, Shiva of the First Ray, was the overriding force, see the First Ray. As the 7th degree initiate, the Manu has at his command some very powerful secret mantrams for the movement of tectonic plates and the repositioning of land masses and bodies of water. Higher devas are called into the enterprise, over which they have command of the lesser devas and the elementals of fire, earth, water, and air. The earth elementals were made to shift the tectonic plates for the portion of Atlantis to be submerged. The fire elementals produced the widespread, shattering volcanic eruptions, and the water elementals were made to inundate and cover that landmass. There were 3 major catastrophic sinkings and breaking up of the Atlantean homeland, all 3 affecting the entire world at the time. The first one was the largest and most devastating to the populated areas of the planet, and sunk the greatest portion of Atlantis. In the Book of Enoch, the ends of the earth got loose. All of the different inundations caused by the breakup of Lemuria in the Pacific and Atlantis in the Atlantic have become confused and merged and misrepresented in the ancient archives of the priesthoods of man. But then the time scale is in terms of millions of years, so it's understandable. Because of discrepancies in the timing given for the Atlantean disasters, I will forego giving any dates except for the last one. After the greatest of the sinkings, leaving what is now North America, there were 7 major islands remaining, quite sizable bodies of land that were thereafter considered to be the 7 sacred islands of Atlantis. Their names can be found in the Puranas of India. The astral wars continued with the periodic spillover into the physical domain, and the time came eons later for the second operation to be conducted by the Lord Manu. All of the 7 remaining portions of Atlantis were inundated and taken to the bottom of the ocean, except for one remaining sizable island that came to be called Poseidonis. This lasted until roughly 12,000 years ago, when it met the same fate as the rest of the motherland. This is the Atlantean island written of by Plato and was much larger than the necessarily veiled description given by the initiate. It rests in the deep to be recycled eons hence. Above water, remnants of old Atlantis are the Azores, Canary Islands, Bermuda, Ireland, Britain, and the Caribbean islands. Initiates of the White Brotherhood were physically embodied and in exoteric contact with the awakening humanity during the latter half of the Lemurian experience, after the sexual separation and individualization, and for most of the Atlantean era until they found it necessary to withdraw from contact as a collective endeavor and leave humanity to its chosen experiments and experiences in black magic, self-serving desire, fulfillment, and material acquisitiveness. The Great Ones were the spiritual teachers, who ever so slowly raised the primitive consciousness of the race, subrace by subrace over the millions of years. Check out the ashram of the king. The Lemurians and early Atlanteans were physically polarized, which means that the primary focus of their embryonic consciousness was on the physical form and its needs and demands: sleep, food, survival, sexual reproduction, registration of pain and pleasure. There was no thinking. There was only reacting to environing conditions by instinct and learned behavior. There was no self-awareness, only a herd instinct and a recognition of and identification with the group. They had become ensouled during the midpoint of Lemurian life and had undergone an esoteric implantation of a germ or seed of mind in the nascent mental body. But awareness of the lower self as distinct from and unique to the group or tribe had yet to be accomplished. This was one of the goals of the world teacher of the period, always the Chohan of the second ray, in intuitively guiding the adepts, 4th degree initiates, and other high initiates in their temple schools for the more evolved of the race. The priests would instruct and train the more advanced for many years. Then they would be sent out to teach the common masses who were receptive enough to what they had to offer. Before the hierarchically initiated program of teaching the Atlantean race how to create and build the astral body, and during the earliest phase of the race when the physical form dominated all expression, the modes of their teaching were oriented toward stimulation and coordination of the dense physical body. Temple practices emphasized Hatha Yoga to gain conscious and coordinated control over the physiological processes of the physical body, and Laya Yoga, the science of the chakras, to bring the first 4 chakras in the etheric body into functioning activity: base, sacral, solar plexus, and heart chakras, which were barely perceptible to the clairvoyant eye. Laya Yoga was the method used for the necessary integration of the etheric or vital body with the dense physical body for enhanced vitalization of physical expression and improved flow of the life force from soul to incarnate fragment. By way of the Sutratma anchored in the heart center, stimulation of the brain to bring about, eventually, a greater awareness of the lower self as an individual was included in the practices given out to disciples of the temples. It all took a vast period of time, in the hundreds of thousands of years, to successfully meet the goals for the early Atlanteans, but physicality, as inherited from the third race, was solidified and coordinated and integrated as a dual vehicle, and perfected. The temple practices of Hatha Yoga and Laya Yoga and Tantric magic somehow survived, and were passed down through the generations for eons of time to be inherited from old Atlantis by the priestly caste of Aryavarta, the Indian subcontinent. These purely physical methods of employing energy laws to work through the chakra centers became obsolete millions of years ago and are inappropriate and retrogressive for the fully integrated modern human who is polarized in the mental body, lower mind. Other yogas and practices, Kriya Yoga and Raja Yoga, originating in the hierarchy, have superseded the ancient methods aimed at the full integration and coordination of the physical form. The evolutionary focus is now on the mind of man. When self-awareness and individualization and coordinated physicality were deemed sufficient enough, then the initiate priests of the temple compounds advanced the training and instruction to promote the development of the desire emotional response body, astral. The chakra centers had become rudimentarily active below the diaphragm, base, sacral, and solar plexus chakras, once the etheric and dense physical bodies had become an integrated unit, and the unknowing masses were centered in the 2 lowest chakras of survivability and sexuality, while the disciples of the priesthoods were learning to awaken and stimulate the 3rd chakra, solar plexus. and begin to create the next vehicle of the soul in expression, the emotional body, an astral extension of the etheric third chakra. When the disciples had perfected it and their emotional nature, they went out over eons of time to bring that expressive apparatus to the now individuated and self-realized masses. The astral body and the astral realms came into being with the Atlantean race, and they would absolutely dominate all life and expression for millions of years, even unto the fifth subrace of the fifth root race, our own, and the solar plexus center was the focal point and clearinghouse for all energies generated below the diaphragm across the board for the masses. The next step in the temple schools was awakening of the heart center and consequently the love nature in the disciple trainees. See a basic primer on the chakras. When the physical, etheric, and astral bodies had become coordinated and were functioning as a unit, Bhakti Yoga of devotion was introduced into the training program for aspirants. There was no requirement yet for an active mentality or any mental powers. They learned through symbols, ritual, and ceremonial, and both liked and needed authority, which was never abused by the initiate teachers of the White Brotherhood. The astral longings and desires required of them were for the spiritual ideals and the mystical vision, and the bhakti practices helped to activate the heart center and establish their devotion to the priests and their hierarchical masters, as well as begin the expression of a new revolutionary energy called love. The priest teachers, in incarnating for their missions, had subordinated their mental equipment entirely, and chose to focus and work through the heart center themselves, and were models of love and kindness and inclusiveness and compassion for all to see. The disciples became the forerunners of the love nature for the fourth race. But the teachings didn't take well with the masses once the disciples were sent into the world because the selfish astral desire nature was too seductive and a part of life now, thanks to the Black Lodge. Only the students of the adepts were able to transmute and transfer the subdiaphragmatic energies out of the solar plexus up to the heart center above the diaphragm. But millions of years would pass with the solar plexus and astral consciousness becoming overdeveloped and excessively dominating in the masses, beyond original plans for the race. They dominate the Aryan race to this day. Once the heart center was pouring out the energy of love in the disciples, around the middle of the Atlantean race, probably the fourth subrace, the door of initiation was opened by Sanat Kumara, and the path of initiation was given to mankind. For elaboration, go to the only path on earth, thus providing the opportunity for the more advanced disciples to join the ranks of the spiritual hierarchy after they had crossed the threshold of initiation. At the same time, the door of entrance from the animal kingdom to the human kingdom was closed, no longer allowing the higher animals to become individualized and ensouled. Groups and species of animals have a group spirit or monad. The White Lodge, in its wisdom, determined that man will have had to do the following before any more animals are allowed to join the human evolution. Full coordination of physical, astral, and mental vehicles, not necessarily integration of them, to the point of transcending the physical and astral by realizing their relative unimportance, cycling back from self-awareness to group awareness and subordination of self-interest to that of the group, and the awakening and expansion of the mental body. The teachings were reorganized to accommodate the mysteries of the initiate path, and the first initiation, the birth, became the crisis juncture of full and absolute mastery of the physical vehicle and its demanding appetites and pleasures. The second initiation, the baptism, became the crisis juncture of unequivocal control over the astral nature of emotion and desire, the very hardest one for the Atlantean consciousness. Eons more time elapsed as the curriculums expanded and the numbers of low-level members of the White Lodge increased. All the while, the self-serving masses satisfied their cravings and their attachments by use and abuse of magical means to acquire everything that interested them, no matter its ownership. They stole, they deceived, they fought, they fed their insatiable desires. No other time period in the history of the planet has seen the opulence and luxuriousness under which many of the Atlanteans lived. They drowned in all their desires, just as they drowned in the Atlantic waters when the Lord of the world decided to restore the balance. The decadent days of the Roman Empire would come the closest to approximating the fineries and material accumulations of the most well-to-do Atlantean scions, but even then it didn't come that close. The first time that the third initiation was ever taken on planet Earth, a group of the 7 most accomplished initiate disciples on Atlantis were involved. This is called the Transfiguration and demonstrates control over the mind and the mental elementals with their peculiar demands. This is the crisis point of soul mergence and soul control thereafter. This is the achievement of the mastery of mental energy and the fully built bridge of Antakarana to the soul level, to to thereafter transmit the will and purpose of the soul to the lower self, to the extent of being its automaton and fully cooperating mechanism in the three worlds of man: physical, astral, and mental. The intuition from the soul then begins to relegate the mind to the background. If interested, see The Only Path on Earth. Sanat Kumara himself was the hierarch of the initiation. First and second initiations are given by the world teacher, and the flaming diamond was the rod of initiation. 6 of the 7 in the group had originated from outside of the earth and its evolutions, but the very first one to come from the human evolution and to so greatly achieve at that time was the one we now call Lord Maitreya, the master of the masters and the world teacher during the Piscean Age. He is now a 7th level initiate and one of the 3 great lords of hierarchy. The other familiar name at the group initiation was the one who overshadowed the consciousness of Prince Siddhartha Gautama 2600 years ago, Buddha Amitabha. This one is now an 8th degree initiate and the Buddha, or Kumara, of the 2nd ray for planet Earth and member of the Great Council of Shambhala. The aspirants and disciples who had been accepted for training and study at the temples, scattered all over the Atlantean landmass, were called the crest of the wave and the flower of the race because they were the vanguard of the spiritual unfoldment for the 4th root race and were its leading exponents for evolution as overseen by Earth's hierarchy. When the integration of the astral with the physical vehicles had become accomplished in the undeveloped and unthinking masses, and the heart center was radiantly active in the disciples, then the emphasis of training and education was turned toward the mind. For the aspirants, not the desire-obsessed masses, and the teachers then, in that lengthy era, came in with their mental faculties fully intact. The awakening of the lower concrete mind was the focus of temple training in the latter times of the Atlantean race, and the initiates then had to demonstrate intelligence expressed by an ability to assimilate and organize knowledge, a one-pointed focusing of the mind, a demonstration of the capability of mental illumination, and a creative ability using the thought-form-making capacity of the mind. This was a prelude as to what lay ahead as the goal and destiny of the next root race, the 5th as a whole. But the disciples and initiates are always much further advanced than the general populations of their race, and the Atlanteans would remain astrally polarized for the rest of their days. Polarization means the primary focus of attention, and mental polarization on the path of initiation begins at the midway mark between the 1st and 2nd initiations, 1.5 to 1.6 in initiate status, when the mind must be tapped to overcome the demons of the astral nature in the arduous and terrific battle of subduing the emotions and desires in order to conquer and bring under control the most powerful vehicular apparatus of the personality, the astral body. See the astral body. The astral consciousness must become as quiescent as the glass-like surface of a pond on a still summer morn. And it is only the willful, motivated, rational mind that can wrestle the astral body to the ground and hold it there in eventual reluctant surrender. The mind was the next vehicle of development for the Atlantean aspirants, and then for the Aryan masses at large, again eons hence.